So, hello and hi, everybody. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the sessions that you've watched so far. Next up here on this stream is Florin Manolescu. Sorry. I'm very happy that you're here, Florin. How are you doing?
Thank you, Michael. Very well. Very excited.
That's great. Great to hear that. I just heard that in Romania, summer is starting as well. So I'm very happy about that. So let me just say a little bit about you. First of all, you're talking about what is your testing mindset today, which sounds very interesting. And you are the founder and the CTO of Academia Testari, where you empower teams with tailored software testing strategies and trainings, drawing on years of leadership experience across agile and waterfall projects. So you have quite a lot of experience, and I think we can get ready and prepare ourselves for a very interesting presentation. I just want to remember you, the viewers, again, that first of all, you can vote for the best speaker. So I hope that you will vote for Florin. And that there are sessions all day long, so you can just sit back and relax and just keep it coming and just enjoy the content. And also, I want to encourage you to comment and ask questions. So wherever you watch this live stream, there is a comment section and you can ask questions in there. And at the end, in the last 10 minutes, 15 minutes, there will be a Q&A part where we can talk about your questions. So feel free to ask questions if you want to. And now, Florin, I think, I will just take over to you. I will just hand over the stage to you. So the stage is yours. Enjoy your presentation and have a good time.
Thank you, Michael. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here at the A4Q Testing Summit. My name is Florin Manolescu, and as Michael said, I'm a co-founder and the CTO of Academia Testari. They say our appetite for risk decreases as we get older. But let's be honest, throughout our lives, we all do plenty of things that might seem a little experimental. And one of those things, as most of you might have guessed because we are at the testing track, is testing. Today, we are going to take a bit of a journey together, exploring a way of looking at and at understanding testing through our testing mindset. We will tackle some key questions. Do we test? What do we test? How do we test? Do we test enough? And we will peek into how others test and introduce the fascinating concept of culture and touch on what is next. So get ready to dive into this very interesting concept of culture. As promised, here is our roadmap for today. We are starting with a crucial, perhaps existential question. Do we test? Because testing is not just about ticking a box on a list. It's truly a mindset. It's about understanding what we are testing and perhaps even more critically, how to approach that testing. We'll break this down by asking those key questions you see here. How do we test? This means identifying the areas in our work and even our lives that need scrutiny. How do we test? Exploring the methods and tools we consciously or unconsciously employ. And finally, do we test enough? Are we being thorough to ensure quality? All right, let's pause for a moment and reflect on that last question. Do we test enough? And while you're reflecting, let's consider the culture of testing around us. How do others test in our teams, our organizations, or maybe our families? This reflection naturally will lead us to our next point. Fostering a culture that truly embraces testing. Remember this, testing isn't some isolated task only for testers. It is a collective responsibility that we all share. And guess what? Did you know that we are all testers? You heard that right. We started with a bit of a joke about testing, but honestly, testing is present almost unconsciously in our day-to-day lives. It's been with us since the early Neanderthal age. And yes, testing is apparently older than some more old school professions that we know. Think about it. Our early ancestors weren't just chilling in caves. They were testing every single element they encountered from the surrounding world. Is this berry safe? Is this rock sharp enough? That gathered knowledge wasn't written down. It was transferred through word of mouth, passed through generations. You could call it even survival testing. Now, thankfully, most of us aren't testing for basic survival anymore, but we still do that. What we test is our perception and our expectations from products and services. So yes, we still test. We evaluate these things by essentially running our own tests in a production environment. Like when you try in a coffee shop, you are testing if their latte meets your expectation. And yes, we also test at work. We'll get to that in just a second. But first, let's look at how we test from a slightly more analytical perspective, moving from our personal testing career to something a bit more structured. And what we find is we mostly test outputs. Now, let's use a relatable example. Trying to complete an online purchase. Say you are buying that amazing pair of shoes you've always wanted, right? Now, you might encounter a few small glitches along the way. Maybe the page loads a bit too slow. Maybe a button is slightly misaligned. These are all potential annoying issues for sure, but you're probably not going to abandon the mission just yet. But then, maybe you hit a great defect. The user flow is truly broken. You can't add the item to the cart. The shipping address lookup maybe fails repeatedly. The moment the flow breaks, especially at the critical points, that's when we stop, alert, maybe even scream internally. We're focused on achieving the outcome, buying the shoes. We want the product, or maybe we have already paid and we really wanted more than a refund. This is a classic example of how in our personal testing experience we tend to take much more interest in the expected outcome, the results we want, rather than deeply scrutinizing whether the process itself was perfectly correct. And honestly, that makes perfect sense because in our personal experience, we are always goal-oriented. So, as we just saw, our personal testing is very much output focused. We care about getting that pair of shoes. And to a certain point, this personal testing serves a purpose. It helps us verify functionality. Our expectations act as a gauge, helping us perceive product quality and service quality. So you could say testing helps quality. By testing, we verify and confirm the correct functionality, contributing to both product and service quality. It's all about quality. Now, speaking of quality, it's interesting to note that in some cultures, perhaps influenced by periods of self-complacement, there needed to be an external push to raise awareness about quality. And here I have a mention about a campaign which happened in my country, in Romania, when before actually we joined the EU. The campaign was called I'm a EU citizen and I have my rights, and it was a campaign meant to inform the Romanian citizens about their rights and their rights to quality services, quality products. And if that didn't happen, our culture would have been much more difficult to do this transition and progression. Moving on, let's consider something deeper: how we are as people. Our individual personality, our approach to life, significantly influences the way we test and our very opinion about quality. We can categorize people based on their level of involvement or stance. Think about community involvement, how we act or react to matters impacting our community, our civic stance, and so where we stand on issues affecting our community. Based on this, we might see different types of testers in the world, and probably even in our teams. We have active personalities, and these are the folks who are involved in civic activities or community-related matters. They see an issue and they get involved. Then there are the neutrals. They don't actively contribute, nor do they negatively affect a certain activity. They observe, but they usually don't act. And finally, we have the third category, the ignorant ones. Yes, the ignorant ones. And these are people who, I have a very good example for this. There will be people who throw litter on the street, garbage, while at the same time trying to be very, to promote environment-friendly activities. They see a problem, they talk about it, they even, in some groups of people, even support it. However, their actions are completely opposite to that. This leads us to a crucial distinction, because the personal testing is not the same as professional testing. When we test things we like, things we are passionate about, we tend to be a lot more involved. We put our heart into it, and think about playing a new video game that you're super excited about. You try to explore every corner, complete the missions, get all the achievements done. However, we can also be more easier blinded when we are testing something that we know or that we are passionate about, because our personal biases can get in the way. The reason I have this slide with all of these games is that because my career first started in gaming, and I've worked on quite a few titles of games, starting from Rainbow Six, which was an amazing game, a shooter. Then I had another game that I worked on called My Secret World. This was a Nintendo game for 9-year-old girls. And now currently I play Hearthstone as a hobby for the last 5 or 6 years. Do you think I test all these games similarly? Of course not. The level of personal connection and passion to each of these 3 different titles is different, so that also caused me, and in the beginning, a different approach to how I tested them. So let's really highlight what's different between testing for ourselves and testing for others. It boils down to a fundamentally different approach and mindset. When we test for ourselves, we make it personal. Our experience, our needs are the paramount. We put passion, and we're invested emotionally. We are more intransigent or lenient depending on the context and impact. If it's something we really want, We might overlook minor flaws. If a critical blocker stops us from getting something we want, we become very intransigent. Contrast with this is when we test for others in a professional setting. We usually try to follow a process. We aim for structure, repeatability. We try to adopt industry best practices. We learn from others and we use established techniques. We get biased by project context, and the project's goals, limitations, and history inevitably influences our perspective. This exploration of what is different is the key. When we test for ourselves, the tendency to make it personal really drives a deeper investment of passion. It's our goal, our experience, and it's crucial to recognize that depending on the specific context and impact of the issue, our stance can swing wildly. We can become incredibly rigid or surprisingly lenient about minor annoyances. This variance, this emotional connection, is a hallmark of personal testing. Now, in the professional world, the goal is different. We strive to follow a structured process. We aim to adopt industry best practices. And this is what makes professional testing more reliable, more systematic. However, we must always be acutely aware that even in professional testing, the project's context, its technical details, its business objectives, its history can introduce biases. We might consciously or unconsciously prioritize certain area based on what we know or what we assume on the project. Understanding this fundamental difference between personal and professional testing is crucial. It helps frame our discussion as we transition now into and look specifically at professional testing within the vast, diverse landscape of IT. Because the IT world is not just about developers and testers. It has numerous professions and specializations, all of them contributing to the successful delivery of and maintainability of software. You have developers, which can be front-end, back-end, embedded, mobile. You have support professions like testers, analysts, system architects, data scientists, DevOps. We also have operational professions like network administrators, database administrators, cloud engineers, support, etc. And there are so many, I'm losing my breath just naming them all. And the key takeaway here is that everyone in his landscape, regarding the specific professional role, has a set of deliverables they create or interact with. And to these deliverables, they apply a layer of testing. The depth of this testing, however, often depends on the criticality of the deliverable. Think about it. Have you ever read an email twice before you sent it? That is you testing a deliverable. Have you ever reviewed a report before submitting it? It's also testing. Have you ever reviewed the script you just wrote to see if it works? It's also testing. So your testing mindset influences the quality of your deliverables, no matter what your profession or your role is. We really are all testers, even in, to some extent, we can call all ourselves testers. Now, when we talk about how we can test professionally, especially in IT, two foundational approaches often come up: black box and white box testing. Think of it as deploying a profession agnostic test strategy to drive the quality of your delivery. You need to balance time and effort, perhaps starting with one approach and extending it based on custom triggers. Both of these approaches ultimately aim to verify the expected output, but they do it from very different perspectives. Black box testing is like looking at the system from the outside. You feed data or inputs and you expect a specific result. You're testing the system's response without knowing its internal structure. You focus on positive and negative inputs. Whitebox testing, on the opposite, is a deep dive. You look at the inner workings, and it's particularly useful if the expected result don't match the actual result during the black box testing part. Whitebox testing defining characteristic is looking at the inner workings, seeing how the magic happens or doesn't happen. Let's make this a more concrete example that might apply to many roles, not just traditional testers. Think about testing a project plan. A project plan is a deliverable, right? You can look at its inner workings, the data that makes it up, the dependencies, the calculations. We should test it using a combination of approaches. We can test for positive scenarios. Does the plan show a correct timeline if everything runs smoothly? We can test for negative scenarios as well. What happens to the timeline if a key resource is delayed? What happens to the timeline if a risk materializes? And can we use white box thinking to validate the correctness of the underlying data that is used to create the project plan? Why? To make sure that we are producing a quality deliverable. This principle applies far and wide. Think about product roadmaps, product requirements, system design document. Every profession has deliverables, and each of these can and should be tested against some specific quality standards. System design documents should be tested for completeness and consistency. Requirement documents for clarity and testability. Test plans for coverage and accuracy. The more people across the organization who understand and embrace this initiative, this mindset of testing their own deliverables and caring about quality, the better. The more that join this initiative, the merrier, because product and service quality will naturally increase with each new person who buys into this quality-driven approach. It's a collective effort, remember. This idea of a collective quality-driven mindset brings us to an even broader topic. How do others look at quality? Could it be that some people are inherently more quality-driven or oriented than others? And taking it a step further, could one nationality be more focused towards quality than another? What are the traits that might define a nationality and influence this perspective? For this, let's take a deep dive into culture. Now, this idea came and this comparison came to my mind when I was watching a movie called The Last Samurai. And there is a moment in that movie, it's a bit old, but so am I. There is a moment in that movie where Tom Cruise characters describe the Japanese people as aiming for the utmost quality in everything they do. Comparing that idea to the different testers and people I've worked with over the years sparked the question, what tools do we have to investigate this theory that testing mindset might differ from one group or culture to another? Nationality culture is a key trait, and culture study offers a way to explore this. So, how we define culture? A widely accepted definition comes from Gerd Hofstede. And goes like this. The collective programming of the mind, which distinguishes the members of one group or category of people from another. It's like the shared software running in our brains that shapes how we perceive the world and interact within our group. This collective programming has a massive impact. Smart companies use findings related to culture to gain competitive advantages. And here I prepared as notes some examples which I will go through with you. So for example, in marketing, a McDonald's company or companies which are global can use different ads based on the countries the ads are running to gain more results. Recruiting, the definition of a good candidate varies across cultures. In individualistic or masculine societies, outspoken and self-confident candidates are valued. In collectivist or feminine societies, modesty and being well connected might be preferred. This changes how companies position themselves during the recruitment process. Target setting. How targets are set can differ as well. In countries which have a low power distance culture, like Germany, UK, or US, targets might be negotiated. In countries which have a high power distance index, and we will cover what those means briefly, but countries like Italy or France, these targets might be set by senior managers. So there's a clear difference between having a target set with being negotiated. In training as well, we have an impact because learning styles differ. High power distance societies might prefer instructor-led trainings, while low power distance society will favor learner-centric interactive approaches. And finally, but not the last, we have appraisals, right? So performance review often reflect cultural norms, direct feedback, common in high individualism versus low power distance countries like the US or UK. So this direct feedback might be seen as disrespectful in countries which have a low power distance culture. There is no single silver bullet to navigate this complexity, but understanding the differences between these cultures can help you assess situations like working with international colleagues or abroad. It gives you a lens to understand why people behave different than you expect. A key finding related to culture comes from Hofstede's study. This study started with a research at IBM between 1967 and 1973, and it covered around 50 countries in the beginning. Since then, the study expanded to include findings on more than 100 countries. The dimensions identified by Hofstede have been replicated in other studies, adding to their credibility. The IBM study provided a very good similar sample of people, the IBM employees in all of the different countries, which made it excellent for identifying cultural differences. Hofstede's model helps us visualize culture like a stack. At the very base of the stack is the human nature. That is our default, what we are born with. It's universal. Layered on top of that is culture. This is mostly learned through our interactions, our environment. And finally, our unique personality sits on top, differentiating each and every one of us. Now, the key differentiator between these layers is when we gather them in life. Human nature is innate. Culture is learned early, primarily from family and school, and personality develops as we mature. This framework helps us understand the influences shaping our behavior, including our testing mindset and approach to quality. So let's look at the stack model a little more in detail. The symbols are things like language and science. We learn these very early. Heroes are the figures we normally look up to. Often they will be our parents initially in life. Rituals are our basic conventions which we learn throughout our education, like using a toilet. And values and practices stretch throughout all the other and are learned throughout our life. And this is where culture significantly shapes us. From a mental programming perspective, we start with our human nature default. Culture is learned and personality differentiates us. The time we acquire these puts us all at the point where we are defining and building practices. So the question comes, why not focus on making those practices best practices, especially when it comes to a good approach on quality and testing? The dimensions in Hofstede's study didn't all come at once. Initially, Hofstede published only 4, which were later expanded. Now, the first dimension we will look at is called individualism versus collectivism. This measures how individual members of a culture are included into in-groups. Essentially, it looks at the degree to which people are integrated within groups. Do people prioritize individual needs and achievements or group harmony and loyalty? Now, for each of these dimensions, I have noted some examples to make them more relevant. So I'll list a couple of them from to better spot the differences between the two. So in cultures where we have a high individualism versus collectivism, people will place a high value on people's time, privacy, and freedom. They will enjoy challenges and expect individual reward for hard work. And the respect for privacy is very important, right? So a tip of working in this kind of environment would be to acknowledge individual accomplishment and try not to mix work life and social life too much. While on the other side, where we have a low individualism versus collectivism, we will emphasize building skills and becoming a master. People will work more for intrinsic rewards, and maintaining harmony among a group member will override moral issues. Group will always need to come first. So if we go on in a culture like this, it would be better to suppress feelings or emotions that might endanger the harmony and avoid giving negative feedback, specifically in public. To reiterate on individualism versus collectivism, in cultures that rank high, people are expected to take care of themselves and their immediate families. It's a looser social framework. In cultures that rank low, from birth, people are members of a strong, cohesive group. Immediate families are often extended, including aunts, uncles, grandparents, and loyalty to the group is paramount. For example, countries with a low individualism versus collectivism, it would be countries from Central America like Panama, Ecuador, while countries with high individualism versus collectivism would be USA and UK. Now, let's move on to the next one, uncertainty avoidance index. This dimension measures a society's appetite for uncertainty or ambiguous situation. And it describes how well people can cope with anxiety. Now let's look at some cultures that have this index high first. They will tend to be conservative, rigid, and very structured. they prefer clear rules and procedures to minimize uncertainty. They will often have many social conventions, and people might be more likely to show anger or emotions. Some tips here would be to be very clear and concise about expectations and goals, setting clearly defined parameters. However, where you can, you could also encourage creative thinking and dialogue. Don't be surprised by big emotions, anger, vigorous hand gestures. It may be part of the conversation. It's not necessarily personal, it's a way of expressing conviction or anxiety in some high uncertainty avoidance index cultures. For the low ones, for the ones which have a low index, they are more open to change or innovation and are generally more inclusive. They are more inclined towards open-ended learning or decision-making. There's often a less sense of urgency, and they are more relaxed about ambiguity. Here is a tip: we should ensure that people always remain focused, but avoid creating too much rigid structure. Titles are less important, so try not to show off your knowledge or experience based only on your position. Respect is often given to those who can cope well under all circumstances, handling ambiguity with composure. Let's look at an application. I also have here an example. Greece have a very high uncertainty avoidance index score of 100. While Singapore has a very low one of 8. So if you're in a meeting in Greece, even if there are emotional outbursts, which, as we saw, can be part of a high uncertainty avoidance index culture, you might recognize a cultural tendency towards making the safest, most conservative decisions. So your goals might be to encourage team members to be more open to different ideas. A helpful strategy could be to provide a relatively limited, structured set of opinions or solutions rather than an open-ended brainstorming session to reduce the perception of uncertainty. Next, we have Power Distance Index. Now, PDI measures the degree to which the less powerful members of a society accept and expect that power is distributed unequally. In simpler terms, it's how well we tolerate inequality. How comfortable are people with hierarchies and differences in power, authority, and status? Here are some characteristics and tips for high power distance index cultures. Now, they will tend to have centralized organizations, they will have more complex hierarchies, and there can be large gaps in compensation, authority, and respect between the levels. People understand and accept their place in the system. Now, as tips here would be to acknowledge leader status, and as an outsider, you might try to work through the hierarchy. Be aware you may need to go to the top for answers or decisions. In high PDI countries, team members might not initiate action and prefer to be guided. If a manager doesn't direct them, they might think the task isn't important. While for low PDI cultures, they tend to have very flat organizations. Supervisor and employees are often considered almost equals. Power is shared and dispersed, and society members don't accept unequal power distribution readily. Here, in a society like this, one tip would be to delegate as much as possible. Ideally, involve everyone who will be directly affected by a decision in the decision-making process. Now, let's move on to another one, masculinity versus femininity. This dimension look at what values are considered more important in our society. What do we value most? Now, country with high masculinity versus femininity score will have strong egos. Feelings of pride and importance are attributed to status and achievement. Money and material achievements are highly important, and competition and assertiveness is valued. For low masculinity versus femininity culture, these will be cultures more relationship oriented and consensual. They will focus more on the quality of life, modesty, cooperation, and caring for the weak. Now, let's have a look through an example to this index. Japan has a very high score on masculinity versus femininity, 95. If you will open an office there, you should recognize you're operating in a society that's hierarchical, differential, and traditionally patriarchal. Long hours are typical. This can make advancement harder for female team members due to family commitments. However, it's not a simple picture. In Japan, competition and winning as part of a team are taught from a very young age in both boys and girls. So female team members are just as likely to display those masculine traits of competitiveness and drive for achievement, as well as their male colleagues. It highlights that individuals are complex even within a cultural framework. By comparison, Sweden is a very feminine society according to Hofstede's model with a score of 5. Here, the focus is more on managing through discussions, consensus, compromise, and negotiation. You can see that if you put these two countries together, you will clearly see a difference in how they approach this index. Moving on to one of the last one will be the long-term versus short-term orientation. This dimension describes the time horizon in a society that a society typically displays. Now, some characteristic here would be that the short-term orientation will mostly think about their current and their future family, next generation, while long-term orientation, they will only start to think from their kids onwards. So virtues are and obligations are emphasized. I will quickly go through the last one, which index, which is indulgence versus restraint. This revolves around the degree to which societies try to control their desires and impulses, often based on how well they are raised. It's about how much emphasis is placed on personal happiness, leisure, and controlling gratification. Because I see that I only have very little time left, I wanted to also showcase this model where I have put Romania next to Japan, the country that triggered me, and to showcase how I used this model in my career, because most of the times I've been working in context where I was a Romanian working in a multinational company with offices based in different locations, and I had colleagues from all across the world. So it was very important and very useful for me to put all of these cultures on top of each other and see how they match and how they differ, so that I know how best to collaborate with my colleagues. There are some tools that we can use on a daily basis to train our mindset so that we refine the culture that we are perceiving and that we are transmitting throughout the world. I would highly encourage you to try to use as many of these as possible, because single task focus will train your concentration. Meditation will build self-awareness and managing stress. Reframing negative thoughts will challenge pessimistic or, let's say, fixed thinking. All of these tools can help update your culture, both personal and organizational. And changing culture in turn can change the mindset, which will create a continuous loop from which quality will win. I think I've went a little over. We've covered quite a few today, from Neanderthal testing to cultural dimension. I would like to ask if any of you have questions before closing.
Okay, Florin, thank you so much. That was so interesting. We do not have actually that much time left for questions, but I think it was extremely interesting and relevant, because so many of us are working in international teams, and maybe sometimes the cultural component is maybe a little bit underestimated, how much of an impact that has. So let's take the time to at least get to one question. So we have this one here. Have you experienced testing with Japanese testers?
Yes. It was a very nice experience. I was a game tester, and we tested a game which was developed by our Japanese colleagues. In 8 months, we had one defect. They fixed it in 20 minutes, and we nearly felt bad that we had to report it. Yes, very good experience.
Yeah, it's different. Yeah, I think it's really important to keep that in mind. So I think there were a lot of very interesting insights, and I hope everybody, especially the ones who watch that and who have international colleagues, they keep that in mind, and they maybe can go through your presentation again, because it might just help in the day-to-day life. We get a lot of feedback that people really liked your presentation. I can just show a few of them. Great insights, great presentation, interesting. Thanks for sharing. So I think, people really enjoyed watching your presentation. So thank you so much. Unfortunately, time's over. I think that's a topic that we could talk about for hours, but we have to move on. So for everybody who's watching, I want to remind you that you should totally vote for Florin on the website for best speaker. And then, I thank you so much, Florin, for your presentation. And everybody who's watching, I hope you have a great rest of your summit. Enjoy all the presentations and talks. And see you in the next stream. So thank you again, Florin.
Thank you as well.
Software testers. Move beyond theory and master testing with the AI-powered ISTQB add-on practical tester by A4Q program. The ISTQB add-on practical tester by A4Q equips you with the theoretical skills and practical competence to truly excel. Learn how to apply Blackbox testing like a pro. Estimate accurately, write flawless defect reports, and catch issues early. The ISTQB add-on practical tester by A4Q complements your ISTQB certification by turning knowledge into powerful action. Visit our websites and find out more information.